Hey, everybody. Welcome to the VPZD show. What are we at, episode 15 now, VP?
15, 14, something like that, ZD, something like that.
Somewhere in there, but I'm one of your hosts, Dr. Zubin, UCSF Stanford-trained hospitalist and host of the Z-Dog MD show, and this is Dr. Vinay Prasad. He is an extraordinary.
Extraordinary. Insert your favorite word. It'll depend on who you ask. I'm an associate professor here at UCSF, and I'm a hemonc doctor, and we are the hosts of this news show. I like to call it a medical news show, but, we don't always get through all the news.
That's true. And, it's good for me because it's where I get my news now, Vinay. I no longer watch the news. I'm too frightened. I'll learn something about Putin that'll make me want to fly over there and slap him across the face. I'm too emotionally volatile.
Well, I don't blame you. I mean, the news, it was always depressing. It's been really depressing lately. COVID is, you have to click on the tab to get to COVID these days. That's saying something, right? You got to click on the tab. It's Russia, and then if you click on the second tab, look at this. Actually, live confirmation hearings are number one of the Supreme Court justice. Ukraine-Russia war, number 2, and coronavirus pandemic, last updated 20 minutes ago. I'm looking at the New York Times. It's number 3, so it's been pushed back.
Well, we can thank pestilence, war. I mean, I guess it is pestilence. We can thank war for this, and also Supreme Court stuff. I mean, it's kind of cool. We have female African-American justice going through the confirmation process. I mean, it's pretty remarkable.
I haven't kept up. Are you a legal scholar? Are you like the law?
I am. I'll tell you what, whatever's in the news, I'm suddenly an expert in it. So when Putin invaded Ukraine, I just decided, you know what? I'm a geopolitical expert. I know Russian history.
Here we go. But some of these COVID pundits, they added a biosafety expert in their handle and started tweeting some nonsense about it.
Man, that's great. Look, if it gives you power, glory, and influence, why wouldn't you do it? I mean, that seems to be the driver for a lot of folks. People have accused us of that too. Oh, they just want influence and all that. We've talked about this. It's kind of like, well, no, VP's been up to no good for a long time.
And interestingly, if you look at my Twitter feed, you didn't see the Russia pivot because I do actually stay out of things that I don't like to think about or I don't have any expertise in. The reason I got deep into COVID is, of course, I feel like I do have that expertise. And people weren't saying what I wanted them to say. They were saying crazy stuff.
Yeah, so you had to have an intervention on a mass scale.
Mass intervention, and it's
led
still
to this podcast.
It's still not done. And by the way, we have to close the loop on something. On the last episode of VPZD, you told the saga of the Cal Academy, which is sorry to bring up old news. I thought the wound was healed. I'm going to pick at the scab. You brought up this this COVIDian museum in Golden Gate Park that has single-handedly decided, to enforce a booster mandate at young age. Of course, when you think booster mandates, you think the place that ought to make those kind of big decisions is, of course, Cal Academy. It's not supposed to be any sort of federal regulator. It should be Cal Academy. And we pointed out the absurdity of the policy, etc. Somebody wrote to me, a very smart person, and this person said that one of the things you didn't mention that is further evidence of the absurd policy was that if you're 1 day post-booster, you don't need the test. And so the booster, it cannot possibly work immediately, and yet the policy did not have any sort of time window after the booster. And so that's yet another example that they don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah, it's funny, man, VP, like as they updated that, I went, I had deactivated Twitter and I'd gotten up to the limit of where I could reactivate it. So it was like, okay, the clock was ticking and then I just lose that account for good. And I was okay with that. And then, a lot of people talked to me, including you, and they were like, you were correct about the Cal Academy, but that wasn't the reason I deleted Twitter. It's just because it's accessible. But right. I realized, your idea of like, just have your team post and ghost on there so that you can reach people with the videos you care about that are nuanced and actually contextual and aren't, the little sound bites. You're very good at Twitter. I mean, you put in threads and you do all that. I'm too lazy. I'm a bad writer. So with the Cal Academy thing, I've been thinking about that a lot. Dude, they needed to change their policy. That's not a science-based policy, like you said, because there's absurdity baked into it. Like the fact that 1 day post-booster you don't need a test, it doesn't make any sense. And I understand that they're trying to, kind of push people to do this thing, which again also doesn't make sense because
that's not their fucking job. I'll be honest, I hate to say it's not their fucking job. They're a museum. They shouldn't be pushing 12-year-olds to get boosted. They're so far out of their fucking job. I mean, are you crazy? They have not even thought through the ramifications of aggressive boosting. We've had 2 people resign at FDA. Paul has been talking about it off at your friend. You can't have these rogue museums decide to set booster policies. I mean, this is not how it should work in America. I mean, look, we can disagree when the CDC sets a policy. We can disagree when the FDA authorizes a product. You can agree. You can disagree. You can disagree with your state policy. I get that. But you just can't have a system where rando preschool, rando museum is setting policies like this. These are products that are under emergency use authorization. They're not meant for museums to decide we're going to use coercive power at our museum. They are, we have to have some expertise involved in those decisions. Even if I disagree with the decision, I'd rather it be made at a different level.
Yeah, oh no, I'm with you. And the thing is, it's schools are doing this. So, public school. So my kid's in a middle school. There's no indoor mask mandate now. Oh. And yet every single child is wearing a mask, she told me. She feels peer pressured and social pressured into wearing one. She doesn't have a problem with masking, but she's like, well, if it doesn't make scientific sense, why are we doing it? And I'm like, good question. But the interesting thing is, so there was a kid in one of her classes that decided, I'm going to take my mask off. And the teacher moved the child. So publicly told the class, listen, if you're going to not wear a mask, I'm going to put you next to the door because I'm high risk. And of course, this person was not necessarily high risk. They were my age, masked, triple vaccinated, and made an example of this child.
That's not good, man. That's not
good. That is an example, I think, of what you're saying, of these rogue scientists, the rogue decision makers. Like, since when is that the role of a teacher? Now, I understand if the teacher's uncomfortable, then there's probably structural things they can address. But singling out a child who's actually obeying the state non-mandate seems crazy to me.
Let's point out that there can be problems on both sides, and I can imagine there's a kid right now in, I don't know, maybe a Texas school, and it's the only child who chooses to mask, and that child shouldn't be bullied, shouldn't be teased, shouldn't be made feel uncomfortable. Let's say that. At the same time, if you come to outdoor N95 capital of the world, the Bay Area, and you're a child who decides, hey, listen, I'm young, I'm healthy, maybe I don't need to wear this N95, and the rule has changed, you should not be ostracized, shamed like this teacher is doing. And by the way, I'm fully cognizant of the fact that there are some people who are actually still vulnerable. Absolutely. People who are undergoing certain types of treatments, highly vulnerable. I think we also have to recognize that when people self-identify as I'm immunosuppressed or vulnerable, they may not be meaning the same thing that a physician might mean when they think about the most vulnerable people. And, I had someone recently tell me that they know somebody who's 24 with mild exercise-induced asthma who is immunocompromised. And asthma, of course, is a subtle risk factor for COVID-19, sure. But I wouldn't classify a 24-year-old who can run 11 miles, as this person could, and has to use an albuterol inhaler sometimes when they're running so hard. I wouldn't classify that person as a highly vulnerable person from COVID-19. And so I think we need to have some clarity as to who is actually vulnerable and who isn't vulnerable. And as you know, David Lionheart had some nice articles in New York Times showing that liberals, particularly very liberal people, vastly overestimate the risk of this virus, and they have a really distorted sense of risk. They're sort of innumerate.
Yeah, I think this is crucial, actually, everything you pointed out, because listen, we tend to take this tack because we live in the N95 outdoor capital of the world, right? Like you said, we tend to really focus on this idea of like, hey, don't shame people if they don't want to wear masks, and let's look at risk. And you're right, liberals overestimate risk. But then you get to, I think what we should, I'm glad you pointed this out, that like, in other parts of the country, it's the opposite issue. It's the conservatives overestimating risk of the vaccine, underestimating underestimating risk in high-risk populations and then overemphasizing the problems with masking. And there is the shaming component of people who do wear masks. So, and now this idea of being innumerate, like not understanding risk, I think that's a core problem here. Like if we could really teach people, like if you could teach the California Academy of Science about risk, wouldn't that be nice? I mean, if they can't figure it out, how is an individual getting it right? And I think there's a client. Yeah.
No, that's really well put. And if I really think about the Cal Academy, the reason I think it irks me is that they are not really proving themselves to be scientists. They're proving themselves to be ideologues. And we all know there's this left-right political dimension to this. By the way, on this topic, you're talking about ridiculous policies. Kyrie Irving, this has happened since we last spoke. This is in the news. I think I did a video on it. And boy, I really, it's a story that really I find so intriguing. So Kyrie Irving is a basketball player in New York City, and that's his home team. And he is unvaccinated. And somebody has told me that he's had and recovered from COVID-19, but he's a 20-something-year-old, extremely healthy guy, had recovered COVID-19, unvaccinated. And in New York City, they have lifted the mandate for the stadium arena. You can now attend in the stadium arena, no mask, no vaccine passport. You can be there in the front row. Unfortunately, if you're unvaccinated and an employee in New York City, you're not allowed to work. And so that means Kyrie Irving can literally sit courtside, breathing all over the court, but he cannot stand on the court because that would be an unvaccinated player playing. And he went in the locker room and they fined his team $50,000. So here you have the dude in a picture. He's like 3 feet away from the people playing. But if he stood on the court and he shot the basketball, that would be a violation of the rules. And I just think that this is why, you don't need to know anything in America to know that that's some bullshit. That's some bullshit, man. That's some stupid rule. And, I saw Kevin Durant and he just went on a rant about how this is such a stupid rule. I mean, it is a stupid rule. And, people who want to have trust in public health, and I'm one of them, we have to condemn stupid rules like this. We have to say, look, this is not public health. This is zealotry, irrationality. This is not what evidence-based public health means. This is literally contradictory. Thoughts?
Dude, this is the left brain ascendancy. So this reductionist, everything is parts and rules and bureaucracy. That's what this is. It's like, oh, well, here's the rule. And it makes no sense. It's out of context. It actually has no common sense or rationale, and it's unscientific. So you combine all those things, and now that's policy. Of course you should be upset. Like this is, and like you said, because we actually care about public health, contrary to what some people say about us, which I think is insane, we actually revere the idea of public health. I revere vaccination as a public health tool, and yet here we're seeing it. All that faith, all that trust, and belief in that system is being eroded by these morons. They're bureaucrats and functionaries and idiots, and you want to take them outside and beat them because you're just like, what is wrong with you? You're ruining decades of progress on this stuff by just behaving like an ideologue. I think you said it. It's just pure tribal ideologueness.
And I look at I see on Twitter, I've been writing a couple Substacks. When cases go up, what happens when cases go up? I wrote one February 10th, March 10th. Now finally the wastewater data, it's looking a little making people nervous. That wastewater, when they see, when they're looking in the effluent, I think they call it effluent. That's the technical term for what they're looking at.
It's the log of the logs.
Let's just say that, I had to do a lot of things I didn't want to do to get into medical school, but I didn't have to go through some effluent. But okay, they're looking in the effluent and they find that it's going up. They're getting nervous. And then I see people saying, we got to get ahead of this. We got to start masking those toddlers again. I'm like, no, it's not what you do. That's not what you do to get ahead of this. What you do is you vaccinate people who didn't have COVID-19 over the age of 65. You boost them. But you take it easy on the young people. That's not going to be the driver here.
But you try not to generate fatigue in the population, too. Which you've done already. What are your thoughts on Hong Kong? The Hong Kong situation to me is amazing. It's like, wait, they did everything here incorrect in terms of risk.
Yeah.
So the over 70-year-old population was like, nah, we don't trust vaccines.
They're like, oh yeah, you're like the over 85-year-old population was like, I'm pretty worried about the long-term consequences of vaccine. I'm like, how long-term are you worried about? You're 85. You need that vaccine for next week, buddy. What are you worried about? You're worried about what? When you're 95, 105? But yeah.
Again, risk.
I mean, they followed the zero COVID ideology. They built the altar to Lord Zero COVID. And the problem with Lord Zero COVID is it's a false god. Lord Zero COVID is not tenable. Now, they could have done one thing, as you say, if they had just vaccinated older people. Then if Omicron swept them, it would have been a lot better. New Zealand, maybe they're kind of closer to that. They did vaccinate older people. They did get swept by Omicron. They did pray to Lord Zero COVID, but, I think they've done better. But they're also, very cleverly, I don't know if you know this, the New Zealand health policy minister, they decided to take their country and drop it in the middle of the Pacific Ocean as an island nation. That was a very smart early policy move.
Very
Good
savvy.
move. Good move.
Very savvy.
I kept saying that we should do it here, but no one listened to me.
Yeah, our problem is we're connected to Mexico and Canada, and this whole land bridge. I think the whole breakup of Pangea was one of the smartest public health moves in history.
You're right.
Right.
Yeah, it separated the flora and fauna. It kept it right. You break up Pangea.
Yep.
So you're pro tectonic plates. You're pro tectonic plates.
You know what? People say I'm anti geology. I'm not. I'm pro tectonic plates.
Pro tectonic plates.
I'm pro magma. I
really
enjoy those collusions between the plates that generate the ring of fire around the Pacific. I'm very much.
I like
for
the
that.
word magma.
Yes, magma. Yes.
Yeah. This is, I think, the fourth or fifth Dr. Evil reference you have dropped on this podcast.
As a diminutive bald man with
it always resonated. It always connected.
It really did. The laser. So back to Hong Kong. I got to say.
Well, I was going to say that's how it was when you launched. You launched your YouTube channel. They're like, "What do you want?" You're like, $1 million.
That's right.
1 million subscribers.
I want 1 million subscribers. Actually, back then it was like 10,000 subscribers.
10,000, yeah, right.
Like Dr. Z-Dog, that's like really achievable these days. Like any kid with an Instagram account can do that.
Anybody with a TikTok who dances, yeah.
Anybody, right? Yeah, 100,000 subscribers. Anyone? Oh man. but so Hong Kong, you're right. If they had just vaccinated, then you can have Omicron BA2 or BA3 or BA12. Right. You're protected against severe disease. The reason they have the highest death rate in the world right now is because they didn't vaccinate their most vulnerable, which is you have one job. Just do that.
You had one
COVID
job.
Zero. I like this idea of the Lord COVID Zero. Like he shall smite thee with open borders. If ye doth choose the open borders, ye shall be smote.
They're doing a lot of things to sate God Zero COVID. They're even in Europe. They started culling hamsters. They're killing off some hamsters because the hamsters. No. Yeah, they got some. Yeah, people culling animals. The animals can get Zero COVID. I saw that COVID has been evolving in deer.
Yes,
And
deer, I understand you could totally get to zero deer. That's an easy thing. You just let Joe Rogan go hunting for like a week.
Who knew he was both the problem and the solution?
And the solution. You got to hold paradox if you're going to live in this world.
I honestly, I listened to his episodes, and there are a lot I liked, a lot I didn't like. But after I kept watching people attack him, even I started to feel some sympathy because, I'm like, he's a guy who has a show. You don't have to listen. The fact he's very influential speaks poorly of you. It's just because you're offering a shit product, CNN. I mean, your product is terrible. I mean, not a day goes by where I look at the news and I think to myself, there are so many errors in this story, so many errors in the coverage of this article, so much uncritical stuff. I got to say, lately I've been really pessimistic because I don't know. I tweeted some article. I wrote something. I saw something, and then somebody tells me, "Oh, here's the thing you're missing about this article." Except everything they say from that point is like totally wrong, and I'm like, "Oh my god!" And it hit me, Z-Dog, that the average person watching just has no idea who is right and who is wrong, and I felt like chill down my spine.
Yeah, that's why when Putin invaded Ukraine, and I'm absorbing all the news, and I was like, wow, at a war in Europe in this day and age, and this is happening, and I did some rant live, and I was just like, God, just fuck this and fucking Putin, and then I realized something. I was like, wait, I could be I have no idea what I'm talking about because I'm just believing whatever I'm seeing on CNN or Fox or any of this stuff. And I have no independent ability to confirm any of this. I have no idea of the deep history involved. I know nothing. And so recently I read an article in, I don't know if it was a Wall Street Journal or something, it was an op-ed. And it basically said, how come the press is not talking about the fact that the Ukrainians are winning this war? Like they're talking about this inevitable Russian victory. But if you look at all the actual battlefield data, and he went through kind of meticulously and said, the Russians are losing this and nobody is talking about that. And I thought, okay, whether that's true or not, what's fascinating is completely diametrically opposite truths can be out there and you don't know which is true. And as a non-expert in this, I have no clue. So imagine what it's like in COVID, for somebody trying to.
That's a great analogy because obviously in any war, there is news and there's propaganda, and they often intertwine. The fact is that the people who are running the show are often the people who are also selecting what information to make available. And truth be told, I think there are, things that I've read and listened to that I think are credible. There are things that I'm not so sure about. I don't have a deep geopolitical expertise in the space. But as you say, it reminds me of what it would be like if I was approaching COVID, not as somebody who's a professor of epidemiology and a doctor, but as a layperson. It would be very, very difficult. And I think you'd have a hard time teasing out what's truth from fiction. Absolutely right.
Yeah. And, on top of that, so my kids and I went to this local Chinese restaurant here in San Carlos near our studio. And we were sitting in there and they had the big screen TV on with a nightly news playing. And I don't have TV. Like I have Netflix and those kind of things. I don't have any cable, so I don't watch news. I read articles on news that digest it and so on. And I found myself riveted by these stories of Ukraine, and I realized something because I was getting angry. I was feeling like emotional, and my kids were like, "What are you watching?" And I'm like, "The news. Shut up! I'm watching the news about this monster Putin, and he's murdering these." And then I realized what was happening is the medium, how you're actually portraying news, will determine your empathic emotional response. And watching images, like video images of this stuff, and the way they're framing it, and the way they're appealing to this kind of very limbic hijack of our emotions, I was like, wow, I'm getting so angry and I'm feeling so much sadness for these people and so on. Whereas when I read an article, I'm able to kind of detach a little bit and have a more detached compassion, so that we really are, the medium is the message and it really does manipulate us. So I imagine the same with COVID. I've not seen TV reporting on COVID, but I've had people reach out and they're like, you are a monster. Like, why don't you take this quote unquote seriously? People are dying. I've seen these stories on the news, and I just didn't understand it until I watched this news approach, and I was like, oh, they're completely emotionally invested in this because of the medium that's informing them.
I mean, and I think there's obviously a role for both, because I think many things in war, it's taken that one photograph that's really kind of brought people to see what was going on that they couldn't see when it was just stats. Yeah. At the same time, I think COVID is a great example. As you say, you can take a video camera to the emergency room and you can talk to a doctor who just finished a long shift, who's seen grim things. And that doctor says, things are bad here. We have to do everything. We have to close schools. And now suddenly you have a very emotional appeal to closing schools. And to some degree, this did kind of happen. But the reality is, if you close the schools, the doctor will still be bombarded, and it will be almost the same as if you open the schools. The only difference is those kids will be crushed. And there's no documentary film crew following around every kid who's getting abused by their parents, who don't have enough to eat, who's like falling behind on grades. So it's sort of an asymmetry of what we can photograph and what we can't photograph. And I can imagine if you had a different documentary film crew that's following the kid who's no longer in school, who's, trapped at home with an abusive parent with, literally no hope, don't even know when they'll be rescued. I think it will have a different emotional appeal. And so that's the problem with policy, I think, at least in healthcare policy, where I do have expertise in, is that you have to feel both stories, yes, but you have to then objectively look at the data and say which is worse. And that's the harder part. I think that's the part that takes practice.
This is central to this whole thing, because you have the general mainstream media that are making these decisions of what to cover, right? So if they're covering the doctor whose like head is in his or her hands and has seen this horrible thing, that's what they're going to do. But they're going to make an election or a choice not to cover the other story, like you said. And this, I think what you point at is this distinction that I often make when I talk about this, which is the distinction between cognitive empathy and affective empathy. So affective empathy is feeling someone else's pain as your own and acting from that short-term feeling. Cognitive empathy is a more detached understanding. Now, psychopaths can have cognitive empathy, so they can manipulate people by understanding what they're feeling, but not necessarily feeling it. So it has its downsides, but it has its upsides, which is you can understand a problem, you can understand their suffering, and then you can apply a broader, less emotional solution, which in this case would be to look at the area under the curve of harm to children and go, we should not close schools.
Now, let me ask you this. In the time since we last spoke, there's some big news out there, and I want to know how you feel about it. Now, do you want me to give your fourth dose in your left arm or right arm? Which arm are you going to take?
Right. I want you to give it right in Buck's fascia, and the doctors out there will know exactly what I'm talking about.
In Buck's fascia?
Right in the spongiform tissue.
Oh,
yes.
Boy. It's contraindicated.
Yeah. It is.
So, well, it will get you the inflammatory response. But, I was shocked because I guess Pfizer's going after 65 and up. And, we'll have a debate about that data. I wish it were randomized, but I think it's 65 and up is one situation. Moderna's going for 18 and above. I mean, and they,
for a fourth.
For fourth. And they have no rand. Yeah. And I mean, is anyone going to seriously look me in the eye and say, I got a 19-year-old guy here from college, a college kid. He's super healthy. He goes running all the time. He's super fit. He's gotten 3 doses of mRNA vaccine. And, he just had Omicron and recovered. We want to give him a 4th dose because our shareholders. I mean the pandemic is come on, get out of here. You have no data. I don't want to rant too much. I'll let you go.
I got to say this about fourth. Like, since when does the CEO of Moderna and the CEO of Pfizer make public health policy? They'll go on the news and say, we will be needing a 4th dose for X, Y, and Z.
I'll tell you when. I guarantee you that all these people in the administration, Peter Marks at FDA, my only question is when he leaves the FDA at the end of this term, is he going to go work for Moderna, Pfizer, a hedge fund? Who's he going to go work for? Because all these people are participating in the revolving door, I think. That's my worry.
Yeah. No, and you're absolutely right. And the thing is, like, you can get branded an anti-vaccine activist just for saying that, like for daring to question the financial incentives here.
I do think that you've mentioned a few times the people who are critical of us and et cetera. I really don't think that that's most people. I've recently had the opportunity to talk to a lot of ID doctors, a lot of academics, very senior people, and I really feel that most people are where you and I are. There's obviously a group of zealots online. For them, being anti-vax is just as tribal and important as it is for anti-vax people. These anti-vax people, it's part of their identity. It's the thing that they get up and they think, how can I slap an MMR vaccine away from a child? I mean, I think they might think that. And then the anti-vax is how can I slap the person who wants to slap the booster, or how can I slap a 4th dose into an 18-year-old? I mean, they're both kind of delusional. I mean, they're delusional. They have their tribe. They're online. They have all these puppet accounts that they retweet each other and praise each other. They're angry at you. I don't think the root of their anger is your views. I think the root of their anger is that you're able to run a 1-hour show that's very engaging and that they're not. Because whatever your view is in life, if you're an whatever, if you're a compelling speaker, you go out there and work on your craft. You want people to believe something, go out there and do it. I just saw this article. Last thing I'll say, I just saw this article. It's about Emily Oster. She's the economist at Brown. She's a very rational thinker, and I think she's quite smart. And this article was taking a big dump on her, and it was like, did you know when she wrote her second book, she gave a talk in front of an audience that's libertarian, right of center. I was like, her book is called Crib Sheet. It's about parenting. It was several years ago. I was like, she's not in cahoots with the far right. She just gave a talk. Why did she give there? I'll tell you probably why. Because when you write a book, and if anyone asks you to come talk about it, you're like, oh, great.
You go do it.
You go do it because you're like, I'm not like, beggars can't be choosers. You just take whatever you get. Anyway, this article was on and on about Emily Oster and she's this, she's that. And here's what really I get to, like, what I get stuck on is, here's what I tweeted. It is embarrassing to write this creepy piece about a colleague, because it is creepy, dude. It's like getting into what she did 5 years ago. And I said, if you want to close schools, mask toddlers, and slaughter hamsters to satisfy Lord Corona, just make that argument directly. You don't need to bring Emily Oster into it. And that's what I keep coming to, which is like, if you want to boost 12-year-olds with, and by the way, it's the same side note. The mRNA vaccine is supposed to be a platform that you can easily swap out the part in the middle. You can easily put the new sequence in. And that's why we use it. Like, it's so easy to change. And if that's true, why the hell are we still getting the same old ancestral sequence that's gone? So anyway, but if you really want to keep boosting people with the same old crap without any randomized data, like a damn fool, you're free to make the case and be a damn fool elsewhere. You don't need to bring Emily Oster into it or anyone else. Or Z-Dog.
No, because there's a political angle. Like you said, they're attacking her because she spoke for a libertarian group or whatever. Who cares who you spoke for, dude?
And
give me a break.
And 5 years, and it was a book, and it was about a book called Crib Sheet. The book is what was the collusion in Crib Sheet? Were they trying to, what was the right wing plot?
They wanted them to sleep on their belly instead of their back. It's like, oh my god, it's exactly it. And what I do notice, by the way, you're absolutely right. There's a silent majority, and I say silent majority because they don't make a lot of sound, that agree with a lot of the rational stuff that's been going around. The Osters, the U's, etc., saying, look, we're actually with you. And actually, a lot of them are doctors. A lot of them are public health people. They're quietly, because if you open your mouth, you attract the loud, crazy people.
That's right.
And I'm saying this honestly, crazy people. I had this one person on my show a few years ago. I deleted all the episodes we did with her. We did one. I deleted them all because somehow when that whole Twitter thing happened, I noticed she had tweeted and she's like, oh, now he's going to go. Like she's attacking me. She's like, he's going to go sign up an account on Parler and, Truth and Trump. And I'm like, wow, you are completely insane.
I mean,
I guess you're kidding me.
What does it say about someone's brain that they like they can't even, Z-Dog, like if I were to look at your point of view, your point of view has been, first of all, you featured a lot of people across the spectrum. That's one thing. You have Offit one week, you have Marty the next. You have a range of different people. That's a fact. Number two, you've consistently been a passionate advocate for vaccination. At the same time, you've also acknowledged people's legitimate concerns. If anything, that makes you a more effective vaccine advocate than these, zealots, because zealotry is not attractive. Fundamentalism is not as attractive as acknowledging people's real concerns. So anyway, you're this person, and now suddenly you're going to be on Parler, or you're going to be on what is it called, Truth Social, the new Trump. What is it?
Right. It's Trump Twitter.
Trump Twitter.
Trump Twitter. Yeah.
And by the way, I don't think he's even tweeted once on it, but yeah, he's the Trump. Trump Twitter.
And you know what's funny? So my assistant, her son, just decided, you know what, I'm going to get Z-Dog an account on Truth because I want to hold it in case some bot steals it. And so there is a Z-Dog MD on Truth.
Truth Social.
I don't even have access.
Telling the truth.
Yeah.
Truth with
Tell him the truth.
Truth with a PH or something. Truth with a
Truth.
Oh
man, that's excellent. Yeah. No, but the other thing that you mention is people. Okay, if you do somebody's job better than them, people don't like that. So if you're out advocating, like, you're doing critical thinking better than a lot of people who are paid to do critical thinking, and the people don't like that. Yeah. So they're going to find a reason to hate on you and do all that. And look, that's all fine. I think you're spot on that. Like, when I get stopped on the street, and it happens a lot, which is weird. People will tell me, thank you. And, I work as a scientist. I do this, I do that. Thank you for speaking truth that we're all afraid to say because we're going to get deleted.
To be honest with you, I think that you call them the silent majority, and like in the last few days, I've kind of been like, maybe I'm going to join this silent majority, because the headache of giving your point of view. I mean, let me put it differently. Like you, I think there are I do feel like I like to comment about issues where I have expertise and I think differently than others. And I feel like if somebody was saying exactly what I want to say the same way I'd say it, I probably wouldn't feel so obliged to comment, but I often don't find that. That said, I think if you do a video, if you do a Substack post, you're the one who told me about this way to put videos on Twitter, and I've been trying it. Actually, it's very effective. Very effective.
Yeah.
So, okay, those have been effective. I think if you just tweet 140 characters, it's really impossible, Z. I think you're totally right. Like, you just, I mean, people read it. I don't know, maybe they read your thing and they're like you had written whatever you said about Cal Academy, we're just going to blow shit up in our backyard, and they probably read it as, say, I hate museum. Like, I don't know what's going on. You know, maybe they can't even read.
Nuance.
No nuance. And maybe they can imagine you're saying it. I mean, I can't even, I don't know.
Dude. Okay. I want to double down on this for a second. That is the problem. Like, I know people who are so angry with you because they read a tweet or a couple tweets, and they're imagining your voice, they're imagining your stance, they're imagining your politics, they're creating all this artificial context, whereas there's real context that if we talk to you, you will know that context. That's why I'm so glad you're putting video there, because it's you in context with nuance, able to express body language, and the thing is, you're naturally good at that. You're a great communicator, so people can see in your expression and how you actually are trying to intend to communicate, because humans actually communicate not beyond language. There's all this right brain stuff that happens with body language and stuff. So I think that's really that was really the primal reason I think I instinctively deleted Twitter, because I realized my style of communication does not lend itself to that. But now, you know, I'm going to use it just for posting the videos that my team's going to do. But at some point, I may do what you're doing, which is just video posts, like. So there's none of this ambiguity. You were the one who
suggested this to me, and I'm going in that direction. Well, one, I'm pretty close to being like 100% outgoing. I made the mistake of actually trying to explain something to someone the other day. I don't want to say what day, but I immediately regretted it. And I was just like, I don't know. Inevitably, somebody made some snarky comment about like, oh, you know, you don't understand this type of analysis. And I was like, are you out of your fucking mind? I was like, I have published so many papers on this analysis. I was like, I don't understand this analysis. I was like, get out of here. I was like, you don't understand this analysis. And then I tried to, like, so I swallowed my pride and I tried to put it really nicely. But then ultimately I was like, you know, I'm not going to persuade someone who just literally just cannot understand this basic concept. And I think that's the problem in the modern age, where I don't know, like, you know, people don't know what they don't know. I mean, you know.
Dunning-Kruger.
They don't know what they don't. But I mean, I think you know, look, if you ask me how do you solve the situation in the Ukraine, I'll tell you the answer. I have no fucking clue. No clue. But that doesn't stop. Clue. I see these other people. They used to be COVID experts. Now they're saying, you know, we need a no-fly zone, or we need to ban pharmaceuticals. You know, they have all these suggestions, and right. I'm like, I don't know. I was like, given your track record in COVID, I just really want to. I'm gonna have to not follow you on this. I'm like pretty sure. I mean, if I had to bet, I'd bet it's the opposite of what you're saying. But okay. But I mean, why are they even talking about these different domains? How can anyone take them seriously? But
and you know that, and you just brought up something that's interesting. This idea of, because here is a domain we can discuss. There have been proposals that pharmaceutical companies should stop giving essential or non-essential medicines to Russians.
Are you reading? Yeah. Are you hacking my computer?
Totally. Are you writing something about this?
Oh, tomorrow morning it's going to drop. It's called An Unethical Proposal from an Ethicist. But there is an ethics professor.
Oh, this Art Kaplan doing this? Oh my God. Please tell me more.
Let me read you his quote. I mean, this will probably come out the day after, but here's what he says. How far should non-cooperation with Russia go? Very, very far. All research, both ongoing and new, must cease immediately. Whatever can be done to minimize harm to existing subjects in a short period of time ought to be done, but that is it. Similarly, this is the key part, quote, no sale of medicines or therapies ought to be occurring, be they life-saving or consumer products. Putin will see to it that such shipments go to the military or are sold on the black market for revenue, end quote, and there's nothing pharma company can do about that, can do to stop that. Here's what I think he's actually saying. imagine there's a 68-year-old man in Russia right now with lymphoma, and we can give him curative drugs. He's saying we should not send those drugs so that this guy will die. A 20-year-old with testicle cancer, curative drugs we have, our pharmaceutical companies make, don't sell them in Russia. Let that guy die. I looked up the UN Charter on what are war crimes, and it says, quote, intentionally directing attacks against the civilian population as such or against individual civilians not taking part in hostilities, end quote. And to me, what Art Kaplan is suggesting, not giving them pharmaceutical drugs for, not Putin, an average Russian who they themselves may be protesting the government or victim of Putin's autocracy. The average Russian, he wants to let them die. It is literally taking a direct attack against a civilian in the nation. It's the kind of thing we condemn Putin for. I think it's crazy. What kind of ethicist is this guy? Is this an ethicist? Or is he an anti-ethicist? Where is he going with this?
I mean, it's behaving like he's blinded by emotion again, and just anger. Like that's not a scientific approach to angrily deny a 68-year-old or a 20-year-old with testicle cancer in Russia. Dude, look, you don't have to be a genius to realize that Putin shrouds everything in a bubble of his own information design. Yeah. The average Russian may be pro-war, you don't even know, but the truth is that's not their fault. And so you're gonna abuse. So we have power. Yes. In the United States,
and some Russians are anti-war. They've gone on their news show and at great risk to themselves.
Great risk
to themselves. And to be honest, like a lot of places, I suspect that most scientists who work in a country are actually quite neutral about politics as long as it doesn't interfere with what they want to do.
Right.
But I mean, can you imagine? It's basically going to some random person in Russia and saying, "Oh, I'm sorry, you're going to have malignant hypertension this month because our ethicists say we're going to cut you off of your lisinopril habit." I mean, what are we doing?
You're going to have thyroid storm or myxedema coma because Art Kaplan says that it's unethical to give you medicine. And the thing is, again, the kind of power, there is a war going on. I mean, the United States and the Western world is using economic power and interdependency.
There's a big difference, I think, which is that who is using the economic power and the sanctions? The United States government, in concert with other governments, are making calculations at a high level using political scientists and using people who specialize in foreign policy, and not purportedly, and not rando medical ethicists saying that that we should cut off their supply of chemo drugs and let's put the. And by the way, you really think some 68-year-old with untreated cancer is going to be able to put the screws on Putin? How are they going to be able to muster up they got untreated cancer? How are they going to put the screws on Vladimir?
They're going to march in the street.
They need the chemotherapy, I think, to give them the strength to be able to put up resistance. They're not going to be able to do it without depriving them of medicines. This is the dumbest idea.
It's dumb, it's unethical, and it's ineffective. So you have all of that. You have all of that. Look, McDonald's leaving the country, that's marginally effective, but it's more a symbolic gesture. But pharma stopping, deliveries of medicines, that's just that's a war. Like you said, it's an economic war crime in a way.
I mean, it doesn't target Putin. It just targets the people taking the medicines.
That's right. You want to target Putin, just target Putin, dude.
Or the other rich people. Yeah.
The oligarchs, there are ways to do that. Of course, he's going to get medicine from wherever he wants. But,
yeah, exactly right. So you're just hurting the poor people in the country.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. It's really. And Putin doesn't give a damn, Well, again, I'm mind reading. Forget it. Forget I said that. That's an emotional statement. But yeah, so that kind of thing, I think, again, gets into this armchair, so everybody's on Twitter saying, oh, we should do this and we should do that. And look, I made my mistake. I did my ranty, angry video, but I said, look, I'm ranty and angry. I was already ranty and angry about Twitter. I was ranty and angry about Putin, basically ranting and raving about him. But there's at no point do I claim to have any answers at all, because I have none.
I got a new one for you. This happened while we were on our little hiatus, or maybe it didn't. I'll tell you anyway. Number one, Michigan State University, my alma mater. It's announced that indoor basketball games, we're dropping mask and vaccine mandates. Yes.
Oh.
Okay. But inside the classroom, you got to mask up. And then here's the third part of the argument. The president is actually an infectious disease physician. He's an ID doctor. Yeah. He's an ID doctor. Yeah, he is. And I was like, does he know
wow.
that it might spread at the basketball game? I mean, I don't know if he but you either drop both or you drop neither, but you certainly don't drop disorder. That's pretty dumb.
Oh Oh, man. That is just nuts. So, again, from the annals of what the fuck.
Well,
go ahead.
I think you need to know this, that masks do not work when university presidents are catering donors. They just don't work there. They don't work when we're dealing with donors, if you know what I mean.
They don't work at the French Laundry. They don't work. There's a lot of places masks just simply don't work.
Well, if you hold your breath, they don't work. And little kids, they can't hold their breath, so they definitely work in younger kids. But if you get to be like a mayor, like once you get to be a mayor or above, governor, mayor, they don't work anymore. They only
it's just
work.
Assume that your breath holding skills are sufficient.
Obviously, you have to hold your breath when you walk around all that.
I wanted to back up to the fourth booster thing for a second, because you've probably looked at this data more than I have. What data there is? What
data? There's two Yeah, right. Yeah.
What are they basing this fourth booster recommendation on? Like, is this severe disease protection? Because that's all I care about. I don't care about infection.
Well, I mean, I guess the one thing I would say is you're absolutely right in like what the endpoint you want. That's number one. Number two, we have literally no randomized data. These are data that's population data comparing people who've chosen to get the fourth dose versus those who have been reluctant to get the fourth dose. In one of those preprints that's currently available, it's a Pfizer study from Israel. Indeed, people who got the fourth dose have a lower rate of symptomatic SARS-CoV-2 than people who got 3 doses. But here's the problem, Z.
Oh, my God.
They actually
this is so obvious. Yeah.
They look at the hazard rate day by day. And what you want to see is that in the beginning, day 1, 2, 3, they had the exact same risk of COVID because, of course, the booster could not have taken effect yet. But what you see is on day 1, there's a huge difference. The people who got the booster are doing better than those who didn't. And it actually gets a little bit smaller by day 2, 3, and then it gets bigger over time. But what that tells you is that you have unmeasured confounding, that they are fundamentally different people. Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly. Yeah, the minute you told me the study design, I was like, oh, yeah. So basically, the gung-ho COVIDians who are hiding out in their cellars are the ones going and getting that fourth booster. So, of course, day 1, they see a benefit.
Yeah, day 1. Yeah, right. Day 1, they see, and then the anti-vaxxers are saying, so see how good it works? I was like, see how good it works? It can't possibly work that fast. Okay, and then
it works so good. Yeah, exactly.
The next study was like a healthcare worker study that they published as a letter to the editor in New England Journal. And the problems with this study are one. They have a lot of surveillance testing. And I think, I'm trying to remember the exact wording of the letter, but it said most of the infections that were averted had, quote, like negligible or absolutely trivial, some very symptoms. Like, it's not only is it not averting severe disease, it's averting like whatever we thought to be like negligible, trivial symptoms. Yeah.
PCRitis. Yeah, exactly.
Or as Barack Obama tweeted that he got COVID, which tells you, even the presidents will get COVID. He said that he had the quote unquote scratchy throat, scratchy throat. And so at this point, we're giving boosters to like avoid a scratchy throat. Like, it's a bit much,
Make no mistake, VP, the scratchy throat was obnoxious. I was there with Michelle, and we were eating chips, and it hurt. It hurt a little bit. Yeah, I mean it's true. It's like,
that's good.
It's absolutely trivial. Do you remember when George W. Bush choked on a chip?
Yeah, I remember. He syncopized. And his vagal tone was so high because he was so fit.
Because he's fit. Now, my friend has a theory that George W. Bush actually started drinking again when he was in office because he was a former alcoholic and because of the stresses of office. And that's why he kind of went so crazy and kind of a little bit goofy off the rails. And that whole syncopal thing was just nonsense. He passed out or something. There was a drunken something. But again, that's pure gossip and a total lie. But just this idea of choking on a chip. Yeah, I mean, again,
not heard of.
If George W. had gotten a fourth booster, he wouldn't have choked on that chip according to the hazard ratio day 1. Like
chip choking. Day 1.
Day 1. By the way, the probable reason that day 1 they were doing so well is they were all at home having all the B symptoms from from the booster.
I saw. That's interesting.
Yeah, you start to wonder.
They're taking the day off. I saw somebody, well, I have to think about that. They didn't get tested for COVID because they thought it was the vaccine symptoms, or I'm
that's a possibility too. But I mean, that's illustrative of like all the confounders in a non-randomized trial. Yeah,
I mean, non-randomized trial is called garbage. I mean, what is he talking about? This is just called garbage. I mean, yes, if you're really, really good, you can do sort of a non-randomized study with some causal inference. If you're Miguel Hernan, and if you have a situation where there is no strong confounding by indication or motivation to get the treatment for one type of person versus another. But if you're doing these kinds of studies, they're hopelessly confounded.
Yeah.
And also, last I checked, here's how much money Pfizer has to do the randomized trial. A shit ton, because they have like $80 billion from the vaccine. And also, you know what? I'll be right. Like, unless you show me a randomized trial of a 39-year-old healthy who gets a fourth dose and has a reduction in severe disease or hospitalization, I'm not going to be excited about getting a booster for myself.
No way. Yeah, agreed. So actually relating to this, the idea of confounding factors in non-randomized trials. So have you caught up with any of this Ivermectin stuff so far as the data starts to trickle out?
I haven't. I knew there were ongoing randomized trials, but I haven't. I haven't kept up. I'm sorry.
Well, you know what? We'll at some point we'll do an update, but there's nothing encouraging about Ivermectin. It's just not, and again, it's like, come on, guys, like the confounders are there in your face.
I recently had the misfortune of talking to somebody who was a big advocate for early treatment, and I regretted those 15 minutes of my life. Because they have like a really sort of an intense look in their eye, and they're like, you know it works. And I was like, I would know it if you showed me some convincing data, but I don't know it actually. So
I would love early treatment to be highly effective. I mean, what is it? I mean, at some point we'll have to review the data on Paxlovid and molnupiravir so far. I mean, it seems to be slightly in short supply.
Yeah,
but
molnupiravir has a little bit of a problem with that mutagenesis. But the Paxlovid data I reviewed, and my thing was like I was like, oh, looking good. The effect size a little bit smaller than initial estimates, sure, but the problem was it was in a trial. The data that I've seen to date. And the package label is on a trial that's only in the unvaccinated. What's the data for the vaccinated? And there is a study, but it has not published or disseminated the results. So I actually don't know what's the data in the vaccinated. And I'm really curious because obviously it's not, I suspect it's not going to have the same
magnitude of benefit.
Correct,
yeah. Well, that's interesting. I mean, at least we have that. But now, so the mutagenesis thing with molnupiravir is really interesting. I'm a little surprised that was even allowed to be used if there's a concern that you're going to generate more variants with the use of this drug.
As a general rule, I'm not a fan of things that are called mutagens. I'm like, what are you talking?
You don't like to sit on the corner and smoke a pack of Marlboro Reds? Come on, dude. That's just a rite of passage. That's a rite of passage.
Oh, I got a good story for you. Okay.
Yeah.
I've been meaning to talk to you about this. Did you see Ashish Jha, another brown guy, another Indian, Indian American, fellow brown guy.
And guy at Brown at the University Brown,
and he's at the University Brown.
Yes,
he is now the new COVID czar.
I saw that.
Okay, so I want to make one point, so here's what I think. And I did a video on this, and I was like, look, I got nothing against the guy personally. He's I'm sure he's fine. And to be honest, I'm sure they're going to pick somebody who I don't really like a lot because somebody who said some things that I disagree with. And this guy said some things I disagree with. He was kind of pro school closure, but at least he had the decency to admit he was wrong later.
Right.
And he should have pushed harder. I kind of dislike the fact that I feel like he's always just kind of parroting the centrist point of view. And lately, I think he has been cozy with the administration. But here's what I want to point out. He's a guy in health policy. Infectious disease, he might have done a little bit of it, but it wasn't his wheelhouse pre-COVID. COVID comes along, and he starts tweeting like the threads, and those threads get the appeal of reporters, and he's like makes himself available for phone calls and quotes, and then he goes on CNN, and he does like a good job of, I think, talking, neutral, calm, kind of calming presence and being middle of the road on CNN, and he gets a lot of media appearances, and the media appearances catch the eye of the White House. The White House puts him on some like secret email called updates and announcements, and that gives him the advantage so he can write an op-ed like 5 minutes after they announce a new policy because he kind of knew it was coming. he was criticized for this by Waleed Jalad in the Wall Street in the New York Times, and he said, "I categorically deny receiving talking points from the White House, although I do receive updates and announcements." And I was like, "That's called a talking point. That's the same thing. That's a talking point." Okay, but here's the point I want to make to you: if there was no Twitter, this dude would not be the White House czar. He is on the TV because he's on the Twitter. He's in the White House because he's on the TV. This is all the same. And so here's the thing. Twitter is not real life. It's not the midpoint of real life. It's full of crazy people. But it has real power because this dude got this really important job just because he started tweeting a lot. And that's kind of scary if we think about it. That's really scary.
Dude. Okay. Lots to say here. My gosh. Okay. First thing, the minute I reactivated my Twitter account, which, by the way, took away that cursed blue check, thank God, that separated me from the filthy, unwashed masses with my celebrity status.
Oh, look at you now. You're an animal. You're an uncheck-marked animal.
I'm basically a lowborn. You know, I'm a mud.
You're like Bane in the third Batman. You're born in the hell,
exactly.
The pit, climbing.
I'm like Hermione Granger. I'm a mudblood. Like, you know, it's exactly Bane. That's hilarious. So the fact that Twitter can give you this power. So when I reactivated my account, I changed my handle description so that people were clear. It says this account is not checked. If you want to, I just hear them basically to post and ghost. You can check follow for new videos, and that check. Here's in my link below is a way to DM me, not through Twitter, but through an email that's set up through link bio. I immediately got an email from a reporter from a major newspaper asking me to do an op-ed on Omicron BA2. And
really?
Yeah, immediately. Wow. And that's what Twitter does. And I looked, and that person had followed me on Twitter like the minute I restarted the account. Yeah. And so I realized, now I told them no because I don't write, and I have no business writing an op-ed about Omicron BA2. But there you go, right? So imagine I'm like, you know, somebody at any institution, and that happens to me. Ooh, yeah, I'll write an op-ed. And then the next thing, and even if I'm not fully qualified to do it, the next thing you know, I'm on CNN, and then I'm a reasonable communicator. Next thing I know, I'm on the White House task force. Yeah. Now, the thing is, you could say, oh, these liberals, you know, this is what, you know, Biden does, and he's picking, you know, but then look at what Trump did. He picked what's his name? Remember his White House
Scott Atlas.
Atlas.
And it's because Atlas was on TV.
Exactly. Atlas was on Fox News, and the president watches Fox News. So I don't know what's going on with our leaders, but that's not the way you find experts.
and this is what would happen. They'd be in the task force meeting, and you'd be like eating a cookie and drinking coffee, and they'd be like, Z-Dog, wastewater cases are up. You got any solutions? And you'd be like, did we, who you masking? And like, oh, well, we mask 2-year-olds and up. And like, you think about 1-year-olds? You're like, think about 1-year-olds?
Eating your government donut.
White House cookie.
White House cookie. Oh man, that is like, basically.
Do you have macadamia nut?
Yeah. What is this cheese? It's just wonderful. That's you know, we're joking about it, but the funny thing is, it's not funny, man. This is exactly.
And then they're like, none of them are wearing masks, and they're all talking about, oh well, we got to mask up. You know, I'm sure they're not. Yeah, we saw the State of the Union. Look at that. State of the Union was a super spreader event. I mean, look at that. Look at that. They're all hugging and kissing.
Yeah. And you know what? Good on them for doing that.
I know,
bad
but
on them for not.
Yeah, I mean, good on them, like an 84-year-old living life. Sure, I'm proud of that. But like, then they go back to their district and they slap a mask on a 4-year-old. I think that's stupid.
Yeah. I still cannot get over how conditioned our children are here in the Bay. And you know what so I talked to my daughter. I actually did a show with my daughter, my 14-year-old.
What?
Yeah, no, I didn't release it publicly.
Oh, okay.
I released it only to my paying subscribers because putting it behind a paywall, it turns out
to that camp.
You know what's amazing? So here I'll give you free access. Just let me remind me. You have enough to look at, but I'll send you the link to the thing. But so what's funny is all it takes is a $5 a month fee to weed out every single fucking psychopath, every hater. They won't pay $5. They're like, $5? Oh no. Even if they would get access to videos that I do that are so off the rails, like they could use all this stuff against me. Like, oh, he said this in a video to his supporters, and they won't do it. They're like, $5? Oh hell no. No, I can't give Z-Dog $5.
I hate him so much. I hate him so much that I'll think about, to be honest, that's the one thing that I'm surprised with is like, I was like, like anyone else, I've got people who I dislike, sure. But if in the course of a week, I'm so busy, Z, I'm so busy.
Dude,
I just can't even think about him. I have so many of my own goals and tasks, and I'm hard on myself for not achieving all the things I want to do, and I just don't got time. And and honestly, every minute you have for your hater is a minute you're falling behind in your own craft.
It's how they win is they take your time and your mental energy.
That's why you have to totally ignore.
Yeah, you have to, because they'll infect you, But
and even trying to teach them basics is hopeless.
It's hopeless.
The brain don't work no more.
It's hopeless. You see Steve Kirsch out there, that guy, the Ivermectin guy, he's like challenging Marty to a duel, and he's challenged me to a duel. And it's like, if you spent 1 second thinking about people like that, it's 1 second too many.
I'm still stuck on this early treatment. They also are the same people who are like, oh, the IFR is so low at young ages. It's super low, and there's new Lancet
It doesn't
paper.
matter.
Yeah. So then I'm like, I keep coming to my own thing. It's such a mild disease that a healthy person should have nothing to worry about, but you sure as hell need to take this fistful of vitamins and minerals right now. Like, that's really important. Like, it can't both be,
Right.
And also,
but a nanogram dose of a vaccine is a terrible idea.
How many colds and flus have you had in your life?
Dude, infinite.
Okay. How many tablets have you taken?
Dude, I barely take anything for that shit because none of it works.
Of course. That's the prior. I mean, the thing that people started taking was Tamiflu. I was wise. I never took it, and now we have data that it didn't work. It's
crazy to me that you would want to do something that hacks your physiology, aka treatment, as opposed to something that actually uses your own immune system, which is vaccine. And even that, again, is not a one size fits all. But yeah, it's crazy. So my daughter in this thing, she was describing her experience with her school and masking, and it was really interesting. Like going deep in it. And a lot of her teachers are very politically active, and so they're quite virtuously signaling about different things, and she found it a lot of pressure. And she said, I'm going to wear a mask because I'm in middle school, and I don't want to, I don't even want to talk about it. If I mention it even to my friends, they're like, what, is your dad an anti-masker or something? Like, what's going on? And it's
I will admit that I'm sympathetic because I'd rather wear a mask than have to have a conversation.
Oh hell yeah, right. or have to let them see my facial expression.
Yeah, my look of like, oh my god. But the other day somebody was like, but if you look at the totality of the evidence, and I was just like, I just have to stop you. I was like, you do know that I have looked at I published a systematic review of every article, and then this weekend I read the Cochrane update on physical barriers for respiratory viruses. So I have in fact reviewed the totality. I was like, so in this conversation, the person who hasn't reviewed the totality, it's you, actually. I don't know if you know that. And I'm pretty sure that most of the most ardent believers, they haven't even read a single study. And they're probably not. The other thing is, like, I can't imagine reading a mask study if you don't read biomedical studies for a living. I mean, there's
really
a lot
difficult. It's difficult to tease out. When I read those studies, I have to read really carefully and slowly, and it takes time, and there's a lot, So sometimes I'll call you up, or I'll call up Paul Offit, and I'll be like, dude, so how do you interpret this? And they're like, well, like this. I'm like, oh, okay, I was right. Or no, I missed that. Okay, I got that wrong. So it's hard. You do have to rely on expertise, right? There is this death of expertise idea that we no longer trust experts. We think we're all experts. That Dunning-Kruger in full effect. It's frustrating because at some point you look at some experts and you see there's blindness there. You're like, oh, they're in a box. They're not looking at policy. They're not looking at the bigger picture. But at the same time, you have to rely on that. Like, I don't want the Russians are occupying Chernobyl right now. They basically have 200 of the staff there working 24/7 because there's nobody else who knows how to do that shit. So, you have to rely on expertise a lot of the time.
Yeah, the problem is, like, Twitter, it makes it difficult. Like, for instance, like some of the most quoted virologists are like people who have like just finished their doctorate and have never run a lab and have never published many papers and have never really done health policy and have never done, the complexity of science and seen things evolve over time. And so, you get some newbie who, they can put a lot of, we've all seen, you can put a lot of stuff in your Twitter bio to make yourself look really good. But you don't necessarily have the chops.
Yeah.
Now, what else has happened? I don't know if I should mention this. There was a very interesting Jha and Ioannidis. He's poking the bear. He was early on in the pandemic. He wrote that thing that the pandemic is an evidence-based fiasco. We don't have great evidence for things. He didn't sign the Jon Snow and the GBD. We've talked about that on this show. He didn't sign either. But what he did recently was he did a citation analysis of Jon Snow and GBD authors, and he also looked at their Twitter accounts and how many followers they had and all this kind of stuff. And he published a paper in like BMJ Open or something, or BMJ Open, I think. It's really annoyed a lot of people because it found that the people who signed the Jon Snow memo I think had sort of like lower citation counts, like less sort of an academic pedigree, but they had way more Twitter followers and potentially Twitter influence.
Oh, that's great. That is great.
But then what happened to him was like all the, the usual suspect haters, they started hating on him. And, when they hate on a journal article, they can write like these lengthy, rapid replies or whatever. And somebody sent it to me to read. And I started looking at this and I was like, I swear to God, Z, this shit's like 40,000 words. I was like, this is so long.
Man.
And I was like, God, this is just such a, I was like, you have to reconsider your whole life if you're writing 40 grand words. The dude wrote a 3,000 word article. You take it or leave it. You don't need to get it, but you're writing 40 G words fighting him to, and then, obviously after the first 7G words, you just say the same stuff over again. It's the same stuff over and over again.
You know what it is? This is it. I've realized, because I've had open letters written to me that are like 20 million words about all the wrongs that I've had and all the people I've platformed and this and that. And I think what it is that these people have no ability to communicate. They have no ability to do what it is you and I do, which is communicate science clearly, concisely, and effectively. And so they talk and talk and talk in the way they know how, which is typing. If you actually pulled them aside and put them in camera and said, okay, explain what you're explaining and let's have a conversation, they would just flounder. They would fall apart. And I think that's why.
I felt bad for him.
Yeah,
like responding to all this, and then I was like,
poor John.
Can you imagine how few people are actually going to read this?
No, nobody. I think it's hilarious that he even decided to do that. It's kind of like here you go. I just went and did this. Yeah.
I felt like. I mean, obviously, I felt like he was kind of pushing them a little.
Yeah. Oh, of course. Well,
but I mean, I don't know. There's a point to it. There is a point. I don't know. You may not like the point, but there is a point.
There's a point. It's an interesting angle. And, John has, I imagine, suffered quite a bit during this thing with a lot of hate thrown his way.
A lot of hate. They hated that white suit he wore. I thought it looked good, man.
Dude,
listen,
I
like a good white suit. Crisp white suit.
Have you looked at the Greek Isles? John, I imagine, is Greek. That shit is painted white.
Yeah.
Like white is the
crisp white suit in that heat. You need it.
You need it. It's look, if we had actually painted all the roofs in the US and around the world white, we wouldn't have global heating right now, brother. Because the shit would just be radiating into space. Speaking of which, go ahead, sorry.
No, go on. Speaking of which.
Yeah, so speaking of which, this is a side note. James Webb Telescope, holy fucking shit. This is where, like, okay, you take $10 billion, which is a lot, and cost overruns and government, bumbling and all that, but you turn it into actual science that went flawlessly. And I don't know if you've been following this thing at all, but dude, oh my God. So let me take a second just to explain what these guys were able to do. They took a massive mirror made out of beryllium and they folded it into the nose cone of an Ariane rocket. They tuned the rocket perfectly to this payload to allow it to be delivered at this location 1 million miles from Earth that is a stable gravitational well, the second Lagrange point, that allows it then to use less fuel to stay stable, so that it extended the life of this mission like to 20 years from originally projected 5 years. This telescope unfolds in space with about, I think, 10,000 or something moving parts, all of which could be critical failure points that would scuttle the $10 billion 20-year mission. It all goes flawlessly. It unveils a nanometer thick frickin' sun shield that shields it from heat from the sun, because the telescope views in infrared. And why infrared? Because as the universe expands, it pulls the wavelengths of light apart from distant galaxies and into the infrared spectrum, this sort of heat spectrum. And we've never had a good telescope that can look at that in space that has the capacity of this. So the first test image that came out was just a calibration image of these 18 mirrors that had to be positioned perfectly, and it shows just on just casually a star that's like 2,000 light years away, that basically the light left the time that Jesus was born and is just now getting here, and it looks like fucking blindingly bright. And then just take a peek in the background. What are those little stars back there? Oh, they're not stars. Each of them is a galaxy. And it's visualized in a resolution that is fucking ridiculous. And that's just the calibration image. Like, we're going to see shit that's going to change our view of our entire place in the universe, because a bunch of scientists spent some of the commons to go out and do this. Like, only fucking humans would do something so crazy. Like, it's fucking brilliant. I love it.
And we do all that, but
we're masking
we can't
2-year-olds.
We can't boost some nursing home patients. What are you talking? You can put this like foldable origami thing in space. That's amazing. I love looking at those. You know, when I was a kid, they had this program that if you wrote a letter to NASA, they'd like mail you back some photos from Voyager.
Yeah,
and I would do that, and those were some good photos. And back then, they'd mail it on like a real photo paper. It looked good.
Oh man, dude, NASA knew how to inspire like awe in kids. I was a big astronomy buff as a kid, and I remember writing to a magazine called Odyssey magazine. It was kids astronomy stuff. And I was like, hey, I was wondering, you guys mentioned that Pluto had a moon. I had not heard of that, because there was no internet, right? What is this all about Pluto having a moon? And they wrote me back this big typed letter all about Charon, the moon of Pluto. And and all this shit. Now we all know about Pluto because of that probe, which, by the way, I was like so riveted, because I remember just asking this question as an 8-year-old of this magazine. And it's like that kind of awe in like how shit works, right? That ought to drive, science, technology, engineering, and medicine people into that field. And yet I feel like to some degree, I hope we're instilling that in kids now, there's just so much noise.
We're not.
Yeah.
It's so bad. I mean, God, I don't know. I mean, especially after the pandemic.
Ugh.
I mean, you're absolutely right that like it was inspirational back in the day. But after the pandemic, when people think public health, they think the people who make like Kyrie Irving sit on the side without a mask. And I mean, it's really a bad look. We look like idiots.
Yeah.
And we're the same people who like make you wear that thing to the door. I mean, I think they think you're, and then if you protest, they're gonna mob you on Twitter. I mean, I think they're gonna be embarrassed. I worry we're going to get scientific brain drain. But, we already have problems. Like, if you really run a lab, run a research team like I do, the biggest problem is you got to always get the money.
Yeah.
Man, I'm like a Mary Kay cosmetic salesman looking for somebody to fund. I mean, it really is really tough. It's tough. You're like, I bought the kit and I got to go sell it myself. It's hardly like having a job.
You're basically that dude from Hustle and Flow, man. You got to put in a little fake Bluetooth in your ear, and you miss hot out there for a pimp. That's what
academic medicine is one of the few jobs where when you negotiate your pay, I swear to God, this is true. They're like, oh, well, we're going to offer you this. And you're like, oh, is there any room to negotiate? And like, well, you could ask for more, sure. But, you're going to have to come up with that money yourself. Yeah. And so you're like, there's a lot of work to try to find that money. So why don't you lower it, actually? Lower that
make
pay.
It lower.
Make
My
it a
life
little lower.
Will be better.
Easier.
Especially in San Francisco, where the cost of living is so low.
Well, you just need a good tent and need to find a good park, and you're good.
And I understand crime is legal now in San Francisco, so you can just walk into a Walgreens and take what you want,
up
right?
to $900 is yours for the. I was waiting in line the other day, and I was just like, I'm tempted to just walk out, not because I want to steal, but I just don't like waiting in line. So, where I saw this, where this tweet that was terrific, where it was like San Francisco, where crime is legal, but a kid showing his face is illegal.
So I recently read an article in SF Gate magazine that was talking about this these posters that have been put up all around town, and it was the poster was shaming people who wear the tech bro jacket, like the Patagonia with like your company's name on it or whatever, and they're like, "You realize you look like a Republican, right? You realize that." I'm like, wow, only in San Francisco is like that an epithet. Like you look like a Republican. And the other thing they were saying is, stop complaining about crime in the city and how San Francisco's going to hell. It's racist when you do that. Like all this shit. And I was like, wow, this is hilarious. Only in San Francisco, man.
It's racist?
It's racist to complain about crime. Like that was because
my understanding is that racially minority groups are often the groups most concerned about crime.
Yes, exactly true. Actually,
and my other understanding about San Francisco is that when you walk down the street and then there are piles of poo, you really don't really care the cause. You just wish it weren't.
You just want it to go away.
Want it to go away.
It's a public health issue at that point.
Oh, that's ironic. We do so much to prevent the errant respiratory droplets, but we don't do anything to prevent the errant feces in the city. Isn't that interesting? You're like, you'd have to wear an N95 and a sea breeze outside, but you could step in a pile of human excrement. It's an interesting public health decision.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Or the fact that, when I lived in San Francisco for medical school, I lived in front of a Muni station, and my windows would be crusted with like all the dust that that Muni it would kick up and from the rail and the electrical stuff on that it interfaces with, and I used to have to keep my windows closed because I would see it build up in the house, and I'm like, I'm not breathing that stuff. So there's that, but mask up outdoors with an N95 because of a virus that you're immunized against with 4 boosters.
One year ago. Yeah, 4 boosters now. So actually I'm going to see you tomorrow.
That's right.
We're actually going to see each other tomorrow, face to face.
You know what? No masks. Of course, we've never worn masks when we see each other face to face.
No, we always wear.
And we're going to be interviewing a mystery guest. It's going to be a lot of fun. Guest. Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, we did a thing. It's good to talk to you. Pleasure as always.
It's a joy. Subscribe to the show. Share it everywhere you can. Check out both of our channels, ZDoggMD Show and Plenary Session. And we are out. Thanks, VP.